Hello, assalamu alaikum everybody. Hope you're all safe, sound, and healthy. And this is part two, because remember I touched on music in my last podcast, and there's a reason for that. Because again, as we know, in Islam there is this debate always that goes on as to whether music was totally made haram by the Prophet. Because remember, there was an instance where a companion of his started destroying all musical instruments that they had, and when asked why, then they said that it's because they had just come from hearing the Prophet, peace be upon him, say that it's forbidden. Playing musical instruments is forbidden. So thing is, now we have had at least 2 to 3 separate occasions where the Prophet did not stop people from singing or from making music, and one of them was Eid. For example, on Eid, Hazrat Aisha and a couple of girls, they were young girls, they were minors, so they were singing, and it was Eid, remember? And so the Prophet and Hazrat Abu Bakr, when they came, then Hazrat Abu Bakr was going to object to it. In fact, he objected to it and said that, oh, this is a work of Satan. And the Prophet stopped him, and he said that everybody has their culture and everybody has their festivities, and this is today, it is our Eid. Let us be a little more specific, okay? So it wasn't Hazrat Umar, it was Hazrat Abu Bakr. Yeah, sorry. So basically the narration was that, and this narration is from Hazrat Aisha herself, where she says that Abu Bakr came to me and there were 2 girl singers with me singing the songs of Buath. Abu Bakr said, musical instruments of Satan. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, leave them, Abu Bakr, for every nation has an Eid festival, and this day is our Eid. So, this is one of the major hadith, or ahadith that was quoted, that is always quoted when scholars try to understand that was there a total prohibition of music, or was there a prohibition on certain types of music. Similarly, as we know, in the Quran, God made a clear distinction on poets. Remember, wandering poets that Quran talks of with derision, saying that they are that they're basically it's haram. But at the same time, God also talks about poets who are not vain, and who have created verses that are worth praising. So again, that is again what comes down to it. Remember, in Islam everything is about intentions, right? Similarly, keeping what the Quran says about poetry, and then and trying to understand what the Prophet did, because on one side he was saying musical instruments should be destroyed, and those who make music are amongst the idlers, and things like that. But at the same time, he did not stop girls from singing during Eid, because it was a festival, which again then comes to the point that is why in most cultures you have music in weddings, and you have music in festivals, and it's supposed to be okay, it's considered okay. And similarly, again, another part where the Prophet, peace be upon him, there was a lady who vowed to play the duff for the Prophet, peace be upon him, if he returned safely from battle, and the Prophet permitted her to fulfill her vow. Now this comes in 2 things. First of all, obviously she made a vow. She made a vow, he came back safely. In Islam, you're supposed to usually fulfill your vows. I mean, you are supposed to fulfill your vows as long as it's not harmful to somebody, right? As long as the vow is not about harming somebody, that is. And now here I find it a bit weird, where the scholars decided, oh, that means that duff is permissible. But the way I see it, I'm thinking, or maybe tell me, am I that bad at understanding things? Because to me it simply showed that if the woman had vowed to play another instrument, the Prophet would have allowed her to play that instrument, whatever it is. She vowed to play duff. He's like, okay. I think it's again, it's not about the musical instrument itself, that which is allowed and which isn't allowed. It was, I guess, mainly about her vow, and him letting her fulfill it, even if it was a musical instrument. And then again, you have the hadith concerning the Abyssinians, There were some Abyssinians who were performing a display with spears in the Prophet's mosque, peace be upon him, on the day of Eid. And again, the Prophet, peace be upon him, allowed Hazrat Aisha to watch it, right? So that I think most of us, like people, those of us who, for example, are from Pakistan or Central Asia, we can better understand this performance, a display with spears, because even people from China or ancient China would know this. Because if you look at our northern areas in Pakistan, then there is this culture where you dance with swords. Again, in ancient China, there was this culture where they would, perform a dance with swords. And similarly, in Central Asia, again, if you move on to other parts of Central Asia, they have this culture. Even I think Uzbekistan and Tashkent and all, I think they have this culture too. So this and even in the Arab culture, by the way, I think in certain parts of Middle East they have this. They still have this, where they perform a dance with swords, and this is usually done by men. But again, point is, this was again allowed. So it means that, I mean, when you take all of that into account, then one begins to really ponder. Because on the other hand, then you also have that hadith where the Prophet says that, there will be people amongst our people, amongst within the ummah, who will drink wine and call it by another name, and they will permit adultery, they will permit wearing of silk, and music. So that again, makes one get confused that, okay, so what do we have here? Well, personally, I would say that if you look at music nowadays, that definitely comes under forbidden. Because if you look at it in any way, now, for example, let's take rap. Okay, this is something I've mentioned before many times. I don't know if I actually specifically mentioned it in any one of my podcasts properly, but if you look at rap, now rap was America's first introduction to Islam, in case nobody knew that, but let me just point that out. Sorry, that is part of music history in America. It is on the record. Nobody can argue with me on this, please. Anybody who knows anything about music, anybody who knows anything about history of music, anybody who studied music will know what I'm talking about, and they will not argue. Because there have even been articles on this subject, okay, of how rap was introduced in America. Because let me tell you one thing, rap was from the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself. Okay? If you look at the original rap, okay, and that is the original rap that was introduced in America as well, which was why it was called the first introduction to Islam, in America, as in the first introduction that the Americans had of Islam or to Islam was in the form of rap. Again, why? Understand, a lot of the African slaves that were brought into America, a lot of them were Muslims. And that is why the whole civil war in America that began was basically inspired by and influenced by and it was literally begun by the Muslim African slaves, okay? Because they were Muslims. They knew that slavery is haram, it's prohibited in Islam. And they knew that all men are equal because that is the law of Islam. Remember, the first law on racism and discrimination was made by Islam, in Islam. And this was one of the laws that the Prophet specifically mentioned in his last speech before he is passing away. It was a very important speech because in that speech he laid down a few laws. One of them was the anti-discrimination, the racism law. The other one was treatment of your wives and the women on your family, So these two especially were given great stress in his speech. So when you go back to that and then you understand that, okay, so the Muslim slaves, because also if you read the history of black slavery, you would also know that one of the first things and one of the major things that the white, plantation masters and the landlords and the politicians and all who were in it, one of the first things they worked on was disrobing the slaves of their faith. This was a very, very important step to be taken by the white man. And that is how they disrobed a lot of their African slaves from their faith. And that is why the next generation and then the next generation, it is similar to basically what Russia did. America is always big on blaming Russia, but the truth is America was no different, because that's exactly what they did with their African slaves. These slaves were Muslims. So when they talk about, disrobing them of their faith, you thought maybe that Africans were all heathens and that they were supposed sent missionaries to be turned into Christians and have faith. No, they didn't just go after the heathens, the so-called heathens. They actually went and captured Muslims and made them slaves. And when those Muslims resisted, because they were Muslims, so they were educated, so they knew the law, they knew the rules, they knew about Islam, they knew what was going on, and so they resisted. It was the Muslim slaves that began the resistance. And so they literally began a whole project. Yes, it was a huge project on working on dehumanizing black people in general, but before that, disrobing them of their faith. Again, as I said, pretty much what they blame Russia for doing when it was the Soviet Union. Yes, because remember, when it was the Soviet Union, they banned people from practicing their faith. So all these countries that later became free and independent, all the stans, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, all these countries were essentially Muslims. And as you can see, they're Muslim population. And when they finally got their freedom, you will notice that a huge majority are nominal Muslims now. Why? Because they weren't even allowed to practice their faith. They would tell you stories of how their grandmothers, the millennials will tell you the stories of how their grandmothers used to read the Quran in secret, and how if they were caught praying or reading the Quran, they were captured and they were imprisoned and they were tortured and they were punished by the Soviet Union government, right? So now, obviously, as a result, the next generation, the generation after that, they hardly practice their religion. So now when they're basically restarting after their independence, they had to start all over again from scratch on practicing their religion. So this is exactly what the white people in America did to the black slaves. And that is why a lot of these African Americans, they do not even realize that they have Islamic roots. Yes, they were not all heathens. Many of them were Muslims, and they were stripped off of their religion, the next generation, then the generation after that, until they knew nothing of their religion. And that is how, according to a doctrine, it was literally a doctrine that was put forward on how to remove them, to strip them of their faith, so that it should be very easy to manipulate and exploit them, control them, and keep them as slaves. But again, let me remind you, there were still Muslims who resisted, and it was those Muslims actually who literally began and led the Civil War in America, by the way. And that is why your then president, who led the Civil War, had the Quran in his hand. And that is why it is his Quran, it is his copy of the Quran that the Supreme Court justices take their oaths on. In case you didn't know. So that's a little bit of history for you to understand how and why rap becomes an introduction. Because, as you know, there was still a huge Muslim community, still a huge Muslim African American community that had spread. And at that point, they hadn't left their culture of rap, which again, as I said, was something that was done in Saudi, in the Middle East, during the Prophet, peace be upon him's time. What used to happen was during the battles, they would lampoon their enemies with witty verses, and the enemies would, strike them back with witty verses again. So this was poetry. This was poetry, witty poetry, in which they literally lampooned each other. And that was how rap, that was your rap, basically. And that culture continued, obviously, amongst the African Muslims. And then when they came to America, that culture was reintroduced into America, the rap culture. And that is why essentially you've noticed that originally rap was always done in the streets, where there's a whole crowd of people and then there are two people literally doing a question and answer sort of a thing. A witty poetry, and then a response. So that is how it all came into being in America. But now the thing is, then slowly music got introduced and this and that. But you must have noticed that in rap, music did not have that much of an importance for a long time, because as I said, you originally didn't need music for rap. Your own rapping was a musical note on its own. You don't need music in rap. It's just that when they sort of embellished on rap, they introduced music, and then it became hip hop, and then in hip hop the music began, and this is how it all started. But one thing that didn't change for the longest of time, because remember, a lot of blacks later on, even when they were fighting for their rights and everything, and then there was a lot of blacks that got imprisoned, and even today a lot of black people get imprisoned, and then Islam becomes a huge important aspect of their lives. And so you've noticed that for the longest of time, African American rappers, they touched upon social issues in their raps. Again, why? Because that is the essence. The essence of rap is to be able to, through poetry, make witty commentary on what's going on around you. If you're fighting in a battle, you use it to lampoon your enemies. If you're on the streets, you use it again to make witty remarks or commentary on your social, your community, your social life, your society, and things around you, or the people, or they themselves. So it's supposed to be something that is based on what's going on around you in life. But then they decided to just go and make it all about commercialization and gangsters and this and that. And even now you can see that most of those rappers who are singing and trying to create a street rap, it's all false, because there is no street rap. And anyway, why even try again? I think the black rappers they're kind of going against their own whatever it is that they're supposed to be fighting for as African Americans, for their rights, for equality, for their status or standing in society. I think when they bow down to to becoming gangsters or showing a sort of a street rep or this or that, and you're actually, you think yourself aggrandizing yourself, but you're not really. What you're doing is you're demeaning yourselves, you're dehumanizing yourselves. Literally, you've fallen into the white man's trap all over again. They're using your own means of communication, which is rap. They're using your own means of communication against you. They're using your own means of music against you. You do realize what's going on here. So, and this is why I have a problem even with Pakistani rappers. They think, oh, the Pakistani society is not ready, but now the generation is ready for this kind. Actually, what's going on is that you people also, as Muslims, you do not realize how you have completely vilified the original concept of rap. Again, rap is not about being a gangster, and it's definitely not about using cuss words, and it's not about dehumanizing yourselves or others around you. It's the opposite. It was supposed to be a form of enlightenment, and it was supposed to be a form through which you could have a commentary or a debate. You can spark a debate. You can talk on philosophy of life. It can be, as I said, because during the wars, during the Prophet, peace be upon him's time, it was used to just to lampoon your enemies. But again, in a witty, classy manner. It's not like dehumanizing them that your mother is this and your father is this and your brother is this. And you know that for a long time, this was the kind of rap that you heard on the streets of America, you know, apart from the social issues and everything. But when they were literally on the street rapping, then they thought that being witty was basically, you know, dehumanizing each other like that. No, actually, if you've just failed, that just shows that you're not witty enough. Because if you're witty, you would know how to really hit the other person without, you know, going below the belt. This is literally going below the belt. And as I said, then, you know, turning it into a whole, you know, mafia thing and a gangster thing and all, you've literally allowed the white person to use you against yourselves, against your cause, you know, as black people, number one. As Muslims, I mean, because rap is not a black thing. I'm sorry to burst your bubble here. It may have become a black thing in America, but rap is essentially, again, a Middle Eastern thing. It's a Muslim thing. It's an Islamic thing. It's an Islamic culture. So when it's fine that it is the black community that globalized rap, it is true. And that is why we tend to give them the credit, you know, that it's a black thing, but it's not originally. Okay, rap was a Middle Eastern thing, and it was brought by the Muslims to Africa, you know, and then the Muslim Africans brought it with them to America. And because they were usually grouped together with Latinos, so the black community and the Latin community, they started rapping with each other, you know. And so they brought it into the streets, and then they brought it into the music industry, and then they brought it into, and it's predominantly black again, because notice it was always predominantly Muslim blacks right from the start. So yeah, and you know what, when female rappers came into the scene, it was supposed to be a welcome breath of fresh air, but it came out to be even worse. It's as if you just brought in the female to produce more useless content. In fact, one was expecting that now females were coming into the rap scene, so they would probably produce more thought-provoking content, that they would once again bring back the actual context and glory of rap, which was, you know, highlighting the issues around you, talking about life, talking about stuff, talking about things that mattered, you know, talking about people that mattered, you know, making people realize again what they're supposed to be doing, what they're supposed to be fighting for, who they are, what they represent. Instead, you just came and vilified your own black community again, all over again, in the worst way possible. You know, why? It's exactly the same thing with the whole Gucci Versace thing and all, you know, where again Asian labor and black labor and Asian artists and black artists are being compromised and exploited and manipulated, and you Asians and black people are going and buying that same brand, you know, or because why? It's giving you a class gratification, or it's telling you that you've reached a milestone. It has become a sort of a rite of passage, just like how marriage is a rite of passage for people here in the subcontinent. You know, despite all the setbacks that people have had recently, which have made them a little more cautious, thank God. But I mean, the amount of divorce rates can be attributed to parents rushing their children into marriage just because they should be society approven, you know? Why? Again, as I said, in the name of Islam, you're going against Islam. That is my biggest problem. You know, this is not Islam, this is your culture. And once again, you're giving your culture precedence over Islam, because Islam doesn't tell you to rush your children into marriage. It's again contrary to that. Islam tells you to think about everything before you take the next step, especially if it is an important step. And this newfangled thing that now women or parents seem to think that they can, console their girls or boys, when they go through a very bad breakup, a divorce, and they're like, oh, consider it a rite of passage, because in Islam, no, in Islam, it's not even compulsory to get married. It's a sunnah. There's a difference between a sunnah and a farz. And there is a reason why the Prophet and God, especially, decided not to make it a farz, because they knew that the amount of fitna that you people can produce in the name of marriage. As it is, it's not even compulsory, and you're already producing so much fitna. You have ruined lives. And then you console your children after that and say, oh, it's a rite of passage. And now you've gone through it, so now you can live your life. You don't have to get married ever again. Oh, so it's a rite of passage to damage a person's self-respect, damage that person's social life, and damage that person's faith in God even at one point. And it's okay to damage that person's mental health, because now you've proved to the society that they could get married and they could give birth to children. It was a rite of passage. Are you in your freaking minds? Do you even see what you're saying? I mean, can you even hear the words as they come out of your mouths? Rite of passage? My butt. I would love you to go through that rite of passage, where at the end of the day you would come out dead. This is no less than murder. You are literally committing murder when you are pushing your children through this so-called rite. Who created this rite of passage? Because it's not in Islam. You keep on bringing up that hadith, and it has the completely wrong context when you say, oh, the Prophet said that it is better to get married than to enter in. Yeah, it is for those people who want to get married or do not want to get married, but they want to date somebody and they want to have illicit relationships. So the Prophet is saying, better you just get married rather if you like somebody. That was the whole context. The context of that is, if you know that you like somebody, if you know that you want, that you cannot stop yourself, you cannot refrain yourself from getting physical with that person, if you're serious enough, please just go get married and then do whatever the heck it is that you want to do. Stop yourselves from committing adultery. That is the actual context of this hadith, which is again common sense, which I think really, really is not common. Because it is so obvious, and yet everybody around me, every single buddy around me that I've heard, they keep bringing up this hadith and saying that, Remember the other hadith where the Prophet sent a man away because that man wanted to get married, but he had nothing he owned. He had no house of his own. He didn't have a proper, financial support of his own. And, when he came to the Prophet saying, I want to get married, the Prophet is like, you know what, just go and first become something. Have enough in your hands that you can actually financially support a wife and children, that you can actually give her a house. And then the Prophet made it very clear that those who can afford it should get married, but those who cannot, they should participate in healthy activities instead. What does that mean? What does that mean? Where does it tell you that you need to get married in order to stop yourselves from committing adultery? Nowhere. And this is an authentic hadith, okay? Nowhere does it say that, oh, you know what? You feel like you can't keep it to yourself, you can't keep it in your pants, go get married. No. He said, you can't keep it in your pants, go do some sports activities. Make yourself busy. Spend all that energy doing some physical activity, a positive physical activity. Go train into martial arts maybe. Go do exercise, take up sports, do whatever it is. And drain yourself the right way. Marriage is not for you, my friend, because you can't even afford a wife. Okay? It is very clear, black and white in Islam. And something that is so black and white, and then you bring your rite of passage and say, oh, at least you went through the rite of passage, now you don't. Are you crazy? If anything, you do realize you're going to be punished for it. I don't know if you if the Asian parents realize this, but you're actually going to be punished for this, in case you didn't know that. So again, back to music. It's the same problem. Same problem here. You think it's a rite of passage that you have to go all gung ho, and suddenly, when you become a rapper, you have to have a street rep and all. It is not a rite of passage. If anything, you have again fallen into the very trap against which you were struggling to serve. You know why, again, the black Muslim slaves, even after they fought the Civil War and everything, why they kept the rap culture? It was to remind themselves of their dignity, their self esteem as a community, their roots, where they came from. It was also to constantly stay vigilant about their place, their status in society, believe it or not. It was their identity, it was their claim to their roots, to their self-respect, to their identity, and you just went and sold it all. You just gave it all away for a few pennies, and you allowed the music industry to completely soil the whole concept and ideology behind rap. You literally ruined rap. I personally don't even like rap, to be honest, okay? But when I think about the whole history behind it and the whole concept behind it and how it's completely vilified and ruined now by the very people who were supposed to use it to maintain their status in society, to highlight their status in society, to remind themselves and others of their roots and of their identity and of what they're fighting for, and you go and you just destroy it just like that. And even worse, again, are, when you see other rappers from other countries doing the same. I think it's worse when it's the Muslim rappers, again, from other countries, like, again, Pakistan and all, who are excellent rappers, and you know that they can make very, very good poetry, but then they think that it is, again, an important rite of passage that a bar cannot be complete without a curse word. It cannot be complete without you swearing, without you hitting below the belt, because it is not rap if if these things are not present, which is absolutely wrong. In fact, if anything, I was again hoping that they would revive the original rap, but no. Again, apparently, to be accepted as a bona fide rapper, you have to have swears and cuss words in. It's just like how songs have now always become about romance, And then again, it reminds you of, again, maybe this is why music in general, this is the kind of a general music that is now haram, because why it's forbidden. Because music, forget the music, it's supposed to be the poetry, the lyrics, right? They matter. Now, if you are singing about things that actually make sense in life, about philosophy of life, about, if it's a Sufyana Kalam and this and that. In fact, to be very honest, I think that Sufyana Kalams also should try to refrain from using music. Because to me, essentially, Sufyana Kalams are kalams, and kalams are poetry. And poetry, to me, I think, especially, it's a very controversial thing already, where in Islam, you don't know where you really stand with music. On the one side, it is forbidden. And on the other side, you have these few occasions where the Prophet allowed performances in music and singing. So, it kind of gives you this thing that where you're thinking, where I personally think that, maybe we shouldn't have music at all in religious poetry, just to stay on the safe side, And I'm very averse to, because I get very uncomfortable, because I really don't know where one should stand here when you're using religious poetry, which is Sufyana Kalam, with music, So that is my personal thing. I don't know anything with regards to it. But I personally feel that when you're making religious poetry, then it's better to refrain from music because I really don't know where we stand. Okay. But when I look at the general commercialized music, and then I actually know where I stand because to me, music is noise. It is true. Generally, when I listen to music, it becomes noise. It's literally noise, and it irritates me. It irritates my brain, and it irritates my ears, and I'm like, just get it out of here. Just turn the damn thing off. This is why I usually don't listen to music, right? But I do listen to very good music, which has very good poetry, So again, I don't know where I should stand here because to me, poetry is important. If you're talking about life, and if you're talking about philosophy, or if you're talking about religion, or if you're talking about anything under the sun, it's fine. But if you're talking about lust, and if you're talking about, only and only the same cliched romance, and then you have your cliched music in the background, to me, it's just noise. It's noise. And especially if you have your distorted vocals going on, then I really want to smack the bejesus out of the whole team or the band or the group or whatever it is, even the audio mixer. I just want to smack everybody because to me, as I said, it is pure and utter noise. So I'm generally not a fan of music. There are times when I really do like music. There are times when I listen to, when suddenly you hear this old song playing that you recognize from your childhood or your teenage days, and obviously it will take you back, and you will enjoy it, and you will like it because you can literally sing to it, as in the lyrics, the music, it's familiar, it's nice, you liked it, and it's classic. Have you noticed older songs are classics again, because even if they were romantic songs, they were not the kind of songs that are produced now. Sorry to say, it's not. They weren't using word porn. In other words, it was beautiful. The poetry was beautiful. It touched your soul, or it touched your mind at least. But again, at one point, as I said, music becomes noise to me, no matter what music it is. If it keeps on playing, it becomes noise. So, for example, ads. Why do you have to have jingles in every ads? Do you know how annoying it is, especially when your TV channels, especially news channels, have this really, really bad habit of repeating one ad over and over and over again until its time slot is over, instead of spacing that ad up with different ads, because sometimes they have only two sponsors. So they will literally use up the whole time span that sponsor has bought by rerunning the same ad over and over again, and it becomes so freaking annoying you want to break your TV. Why do you have to have jingles in ads? Who says you cannot make a good ad without music? I still remember one of the best ads that I ever watched as a child. And I remember that ad was actually a British ad. And I don't remember the company's name, but it was, unfortunately, well, it was a beer ad, okay? So it was, unfortunately, in the sense that, okay. So it was a beer ad. It was, I think, a lager ad. I'm not sure. But anybody who remembers from the, 80s, it was, and they didn't even actually talk about I mean, if you're a child just looking at the ad, you wouldn't even know that they're actually talking about a beer, or, that they're talking about this drink. Literally, it's amazing. It was so well made, and they basically just focused on a gigantic, most beautiful horse, and there was a narration going on describing, obviously, the attributes of the drink and everything, and in again in a roundabout way. Point being, it was storytelling. It was narration that was pulling at your imagination, that imagine if this and that and this, and and showing you a whole countryside with a horse, and in front of a, maybe in front of a pub, I'm not sure. But and only at the end, you would see the lager, the glass. and you would realize, oh, so this was an ad for a beer. Now that, if that isn't a creative ad, I don't know what is. And imagine that it has stuck with me till date. I've forgotten the company, I've forgotten it all, but I remember the ad. The ad is vivid in my mind. You know? Imagine how creative is that ad where they're just talking to you. There's not a speck of music, not a speck, not a sound, not a peep, and they're just weaving a story upon you. And at the end, you realize, oh, they were talking about, beer. So now that is a good advertisement, is what I'm saying. And I've seen very few similar kinds of ads in Pakistan. Yes, I have seen very, very creative ads, mind you, done by Javad Bashir, Adil Hashmi, and gang, with Faisal and all. As you know, these are some of the most favorite ads of everybody's, where they did Mobilink. I think they did Mobilink ads. And the fact that Mobilink and Ufone are rivals, and they used to literally answer each other in their ads, that was also some of the funnest thing ever that they could do. That was creative. That is creative ads. Even though at the end, even they would put their jingle at the end. But throughout the ad, no music. It's like literally scripted. You have these skits, these little skits. And literally, you would have also those ads, as I said, where they were literally, going back and forth. Ufone would say something, and then Jazz would come up with a witty reply. It's basically like rap, isn't it, in a way? Actually, not even rap. This is something that is also very close to our subcontinental culture, where we have the call and reply, or call and answer. So it was literally the call and answer effect going on. So one telecom company would say something, and then the other would say, oh yeah, well, here's something for you. And then the other one would come, oh yeah, well, I throw this back at you. So you could literally see them fighting through their ads, and it was hilarious because they made them hilarious deliberately. And that is the whole point of a good ad, you see, where music doesn't really have a role in it. Stop making noisy jingle ads, okay? Is all I'm saying. When you have constant music blaring in the background, it is not a good thing. Too much of everything or anything is not a good thing. And if the music that is produced nowadays is anything to go by, if it proves anything, it proves why music is forbidden. It does show that there is now a lot of satanic activities that are being promoted through music, that people unconsciously are being brainwashed or conditioned into. And people who have some knowledge of such activities, they come up and they try to tell you about it, and we try to dismiss it. But remember how even once the Beatles were, was it the Beatles, I think? Yeah. Even they were accused that, if you played their music in reverse, then you could actually hear background sounds of where they're trying to hypnotize you. I don't know if it was the Beatles or which band it was, but remember there was this huge controversy decades ago about it. And I think it was also in Guns N' Roses, was it? It was also in Guns N' Roses, where you could literally hear them chanting something in the background. Now, they might have thought it was fun, but again, it's not fun, you see. We seem to think that it is fun to, it is fun to use black magic, just for fun. We think, oh, it's fun. Why do you have to take everything so seriously? We're just playing around with it. We're not serious. It's not like we're doing actual black magic. But again, the fact that you are promoting satanic activities in the name of fun, you're not producing good, clean music at the end of the day. You are producing noise. And with that noise, you're adding a satanic aspect to it for fun. So that just shows where our brains are at. As you know, it is not actually just for fun. If you have listened to recently what Hollywood has been saying against God and, poking fun at God and and you know what happened later on, obviously, to those people. But again, point being, listen, we all go to that place of despair. We all go to that place of disillusionment. We all go to that place where we get completely pissed off at God. It is normal, yes, it is normal. But you know what is not normal is to literally decide that it is more trendy or fun, or that it is more glorifying to bring in Satan and to promote him. That is a whole new demented. That's a whole new level of being demented and retarded, is what I'm saying. You need to understand that there is a reason why the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, guard your tongue in front of people and guard your thoughts when you're on your own. Because it is true. We think that, oh, we're just thinking, but sometimes these thoughts, when they get to overpower you, they can literally take over you and your existence, and that is also essentially the way we develop mental health problems. Maybe you've not noticed it, but one of the reasons why and how we develop depression or mental health problems is that there's a certain thought that keeps nagging at us, and then it grows and it grows and it grows, and you try to stop it and you can't stop it, and it grows and it grows, and then you have to try. And why do we always try to curb those thoughts? Because when they overpower you, when they overtake you, you break down. That is essentially the cause of mental illness, of stress, of anxiety, of depression, is something that nags at you and you can't do anything about it. And so it starts growing into this deep, dark obsession. It's not even your obsession. No, the thought itself is now getting an obsession of its own, and then it's overpowering you. And that is why we're always looking for things to do, why we always try to keep busy in life. Because remember, an empty mind is the devil's workshop. We don't say this for no reason. It is extremely true. And this is why I say that, yes, you are allowed to begrudge a person who takes away from your life purpose. You are allowed to begrudge that person who takes from your life activities, because it is so important to keep your mind and your body busy, occupied. It is so important, because when all of this is taken away from you and you have nothing to occupy your mind with, nothing to occupy your time with, then bad things happen. Bad thoughts occur, bad things happen, and your life goes down the drain. And this is why, as I keep on saying, that my biggest problem, again, with societies like ours is that they are so busy creating obstacles in people who are trying to keep themselves busy and active in life, because they want you to live the way they want you to live. That is not how it works. We all have a path that we need to walk on, and we must walk on that path. And nobody has the right to put obstacles in that path, because once everything is taken away and you have nothing but time on your hands, believe me, you can destroy nations. You will want to destroy nations. I'm telling you, you will want to destroy nations, because everything is taken away from you. And you have nothing now, nothing at all, no movement, no activity, nothing to keep your mind occupied. And so your mind now decides to occupy itself in another way, a very dangerous way, which in some cases you might argue people deserve then. People actually deserve to be wiped out of this earth because they put you in that place in the first place. But that's, again, why I keep on stressing on the importance of never, ever, ever trying to disrupt a person's path. It is a fact. And so what we have now here is music that is being produced in which the devil is literally being worshipped. you've already got impressionable minds that you've made more impressionable through social media, because social media means there is a 24/7 brain conditioning going on, brainwashing going on. So minds are becoming more and more impressionable. Again, why? Minds are not being occupied by doing something that they should be doing. Again, why? Society has stripped people off of healthy activities. Why? Because society has put money against everything. And we cannot afford to do the things that we never needed money for before. So, see where it's all taking us? Yeah. And then you end up having, again, social media. So, 24/7 access to all those people who are literally promoting negativity through music. They're promoting negativity through brand scamming. They're promoting negativity through creating false lifestyles that don't even exist. And they are putting you into a more state, a bigger, worse state of depression, in which you will then again go towards the F it part and say, okay, F it, why can't I have it? Why can't I have it? And they've put you in that rat race that on a normal life, I mean if we didn't have all of these, if we didn't have our normal lives closed up, and we didn't have these 24/7 brain condition brain conditioning going on, then we wouldn't even bother. Like, for example, listen, if you're having a healthy, active life where you have something to do, it may be a business, it may be a job, it may be an investment, it may be something you're working hard on, it may be a hobby, it may be anything, you don't have time to look at these reels. You don't have time you just wind down, you look at them, you actually realize them for what they are. You even, they may make you laugh, they may make you snicker, they may make you think, oh, what BS, and you move on, right? You don't get easily impressed, because your mind is not an empty space that's not being occupied by only these things, and it's no longer an impressionable mind. Why do we call young minds impressionable? Because they're still in the learning phase. They still haven't reached that part in life where they can fully occupy themselves. They're still learning on what to occupy themselves with. And as I said, as a society, we have stripped people off of healthy activities, because where playing cricket needed no money, now suddenly you need money to go and play cricket, or to join any sports activities, where before on a community level neighbors would get together and do it. But now even on a community level, if neighbors want to get together and do it in the park or something, then suddenly your society's management will say, oh, there's a coach here, you can join the team here, and then the coach asks for money per child, and then you have to pay it every month, and then sometime again your expenditures are already increasing, whereas your income is the same that it was 10-15 years ago. Where are you supposed to go with that? Hobbies have been turned into expensive activities. Before, you literally didn't need money to have a hobby, but now everything has become again commercialized. So even now having a hobby has become a sort of a class gratification too. I mean, why is picking up a sport activity now suddenly supposed to be beyond your means? This was supposed to be something that was within everybody's means. As I said, people would just gather and they would play their sports. They would go to the nearby park, they would play their sports. But now suddenly you have all these clubs and all these groups and all these, and you have to join and pay money and this and that, and it gets more and more and more. So how many activities can your parents help you keep up with, or can help you continue with? This was always there in many other sports activities. Yes, when you have to join groups and clubs, it was always there, the money aspect. But now it's getting worse. Now even the smallest of hobbies, like knitting and crocheting, has become something that you would think twice before you go to get a wool. It's arts and crafts is so expensive. Why would you want to sit and spend so many thousands and thousands and thousands of rupees on an arts and craft thing that would not even be complete because you would have to go and buy more, you know? Why is suddenly, why has everything now become all about money? So you have completely stripped all the natural instincts of having a simple hobby, you know. And now even letting your children go out and play has become a matter of security. So you prefer your children to stay in, and then what are they going to do when they're in? Because they are energetic people. They are supposed to be spending their energy somewhere. What are you going to do then? You're going to turn on the TV, then you're going to give them their mobiles, then you're going to give them a tablet, and then you sit and you complain about how social media has taken over. It's you, the parents, who don't have time to give to your children. You don't have the energy, or in other words, to give to your children, and you want them out of your hair. But then you fear for their security, so you don't want them out playing with their friends on the road or on the streets or in the parks. And then they're stuck home, and what are they going to do at home then? Again, hobbies have become so expensive. What is the next best, almost free thing they can do? Social media. And then you have music. So yeah, it is, when you look at music nowadays, you know, you actually know then, oh yeah, that's why music is forbidden. This is the kind of music that's forbidden. Oh yeah. I mean, why does everybody have to have the shock value in everything? You don't realize that people have already become so desensitized that there is no shock value. And in fact, actually, I think the industry realizes that, and that is why they're always trying to up their game in the shock value. But you're just getting more and more disgusting and pathetic, because all you're doing is what you've been doing for decades, literally, and that is sexualizing children, sexualizing teenagers, and you actually make people think, and honestly, people they end up thinking that, oh, is that what teenagers are supposed to, are they like rabbits? And then you realize that in real life, it's not you who's the odd one out. A whole majority of you are not rabbits. And a whole majority of you are actually sitting at home thinking, oh, are teenagers nowadays rabbits? You know? How many of you have gone through that thought process where you're sitting and thinking, oh, seriously, is that what is normal nowadays for us teenagers? I did a podcast years ago on this thing, especially. In fact, no, I did another one also last year sometime, if not, yeah, last year or maybe in the beginning of this year, where I literally talked about how we are sexualizing every relationship. We are sexualizing every gender. We are sexualizing every age group, and we need to stop. You really need to stop. Because suddenly it's okay to sexualize children, and sorry, these are parents too. I never understood why parents thought that it was hilarious or funny or cute that their little kids are talking about boyfriends and girlfriends, or why they think that it's cute when they dance and sing to mature songs. I think that is the only way people can. Sometimes I marvel at it and I think, wow, people have a lot of tolerance and patience, that they are trying to think of it in a positive way, that it's okay, they're kids, they don't even know what they're doing, which is true. But then, you know what? Stop exposing them to these things. There's something known as PG, and there's PG for a reason. Again, if you put a mobile in your children's hands, or if you turn on the TV or to any channel that they have access to, what do you expect with no PG? And so your children, from a very young, very impressionable age, with impressionable minds, are listening to questionable music. They are watching questionable aspects. They are looking at children their own age being sexualized on social media by their own parents, by making them wear. There's a reason why when you're young, your parents never allowed you to wear grown-up clothes. because there's a time for everything. And you know why now people are completely out of their wits' end? Because you're constantly getting instant gratification. You know what an actual rite of passage is? These little things are your rites of passage. You know, when you know that, oh, now I've reached this age, now I can do this thing. Oh, now I've reached this age, now I can see this thing. Oh, now I've come to this age, I can wear this thing. Now I've come to this age, I can actually do. You know, these are your little rites of passage. That okay, now why? I mean, imagine at the rate we're going, we might as well give a car to a 10-year-old. In fact, people have started doing that. Thank you very much. For the past 2 years, we've been looking at how minors are given cars by their parents. And then when they have road accidents and they kill somebody or they die themselves, then their parents are crying and everybody's like, oh, poor. Seriously, you should be smacking the bejesus out of those parents and ask them, why the frack did you give your minor son a car? There is a reason why you have to turn 18 and get a license first in order to drive a damn car. But that shows the mentality of the parents themselves. Again, you cannot blame kids when it's the parents themselves who are doing this to their own kids. They are not allowing their kids to grow, to actually grow, to take their time and grow. They're not allowing their kids to enjoy being kids. They're not, letting their kids to enjoy being innocent and naive. It's like literally you're popping them out of your uteruses and immediately landing them onto mature level and like, okay, might as well let them have sex at the age of 3 then. At the rate you people are going, it is very dangerous, I'm sorry, but you are 100% responsible for what your kids have become. When kids are no longer kids, what happened to showing them those little innocent funny cartoons? I even did a podcast on that, on preserving innocence of teenagers, on what Archie comics used to be and it used to represent, and how I like the fact that it stayed that way for the longest time until suddenly now it has gone into this dark, demented world again. Why does everything have to be dark and demented? Especially when your teenagers are already in a dark place because of what you have exposed them to. If you hadn't exposed them to all of this shit, they wouldn't be where they are today. If you had kept them naive and innocent, and if you had not sexualized them or not showed them things that are sexualizing them or teaching them to sexualize themselves, why are 10-year-old girls going to Sephora and buying makeup and then doing makeup tutorials? What happened to mothers always pushing the hair back out of their children's foreheads, What happened to teachers tapping on the fingers of the students who tried to look mature or dress mature, These are rites of passages that you need to observe where where you grow into semi-adulthood and then you grow into adulthood and then, how are you going to enjoy these little things that come with each step, each phase in life, if you're going to get them all at once? Of course you're going to be bored out of your wits end, and then you're going to end up in satanic activities because you actually do not know what to do with yourselves. And by satanic activities, I mean actual satanic activities. In case you didn't know, there is this whole thing that has been going on gradually for the past 2 decades, but in the recent years, these recent years, it's blowing up, where people are once again going towards witchcraft. And again, look at how this generation was being conditioned towards it. The reason our generation didn't take it so seriously, as I said, is because we actually grew up having healthy activities and hobbies, and we grew up using our minds to create things. We didn't grow up with social media. Social media came much later in our lives. The internet came, when we were literally in our early teens, early teens. So It's no, yeah, in a way. But proper internet came when we were in our late teens, actually, or in our when we were hitting 20, you know. So in our early teens was when Windows came, and so that concept of internet had started, yes, but it was still, it wasn't that common. And now you have the phones and everything, and again it's a mess, it's a whole mess. The reason again why we are not so easily impressed, why we don't fall for these things, is because, as I said, we have already, we're living lives, we've lived our lives, and we have experienced things firsthand in real life, and so we kind of get the gist of what is going on around us. We don't get so easily, because again we have actually dealt with real life people, and we already saw the signs as they began, when all this hypocrisy and falsifying of lifestyles and this and that began in front of us. Then, because the first thing we question, because we are those of us who have actually tried to earn a living and we've worked hard, so obviously the first question we're also thinking is, how did that even happen? How did they even look at the recession nowadays? Look at the inflation nowadays. How are they even getting things done? And you start questioning, and then you find out, oh, it's all false. But the young people who are growing up with these things already, they're thinking that, oh, this is it. This is it. This is how it is. This is how it's supposed to be. And then they question, why don't I have it? Why can't I have it? And then they go towards that. And similarly, as I said, this is how the introduction towards witchcraft and magic and all came. Is, remember how when we were teenagers also, we started reading a lot of material on, like Sabrina the Witch or the Teenage Witch, and how we looked at, magic in the good sense, and you have Harry Potter and this and that, and it was all about magic and this and that, but to us it was fantasy world, and we didn't think too much of it. But again, to those younger than us who still had impressionable minds, now they're like, oh yeah, why can't we have magic in our lives? And there has to be something here and all. And then there again, as I said, when obsession drives you, and then when you have singers and musicians, and then you have people in Hollywood, and everybody is literally promoting satanic worship and satanic activities, and they are promoting vulgarity, and they're promoting sexualization of every age and every gender possible, then it's not easy. Again, when you've grown up with all of that, it's not easy to get yourselves to think rationally, because this has now become your way of life. Again, as I said, for us, it's not our way of life, because we started our lives differently, in a different way, in a different time. And we grew up into this, and so we saw what was happening, so we weren't so easily impressed. But these young people, they started with this as the norm. And again, add to it, their parents didn't help. Oh, everybody's on social media, there's no harm in that, let's also be on social media, let's bring our children in, your children do not even have a say in it. They're so young, and they're toddlers and all, and you're putting them on social media. Listen, you want to be on social media, you go ahead, but keep your children out of it. I am amazed that people of our age groups and older or slightly younger, from especially from 30s, yeah, it's younger, the 30s, the age group, the 30s age group, I am amazed at your stupidity here and your lack of common sense, that you're bringing your children into your social media platforms. You really didn't grow up with a sense of privacy, did you? You do realize the amount of the amount of dangers that you're exposing yourself and your children to on social media, right? Heck, we learned of it. In the beginning, everybody's excited. We were also excited because, after all, when the whole metaverse was originally created as Facebook, and when social media originally began, to us it was this fun activity where we could connect with friends and family from all over the world and make new friends in a community. And then there was YouTube and all, and then everybody was just, we were all spreading whatever we could online, because to us it was exciting to share everything, until repercussions took place and we realized that, oh. And then we realized that Facebook was actually stealing our data, and then we realized that now our data is not safe anywhere on social media, that even our telecommunication companies and our ISPs could also be stealing our data and sharing it illegally with everybody else. So again, in the name of marketing and all that, so again, where do we stand? And yet you are exposing your little minor children. At least let them be old enough to choose whether they want to be a part of your social media platform or not. Again, you are the ones that are not working on the self-respect of your children. And as I said, this is again one of my pet peeves with parents at large, is that parents are the first people who humiliate their children. They're the first people who deny self-respect to their children. They're the first people who snub their children. They're the first people who act as if they own their children. How can you expect, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, that if you humiliate your child in public, especially, if you do not care about your child's self-respect, where do you think that child is ever going to come? Where is he going to bring that self-respect back from? Where is he going to get it from? The importance of your child's self-respect was laid down by the Prophet himself, peace be upon him. And look at us, what we're doing. Muslims and non-Muslims alike, this is a global problem right now. So look at what we're doing. We are not at all ensuring that our children have self-respect, in the sense that we are ourselves breaking down their self-respect. We are snubbing them, we're humiliating them, we treat them as if they're our assets, we're controlling them. Like, why? You are exposing your children to this, and then you're sitting down and complaining about why they're doing what they're doing and where they're going, and it's on you. Okay? It's on you. Use PG. Well, this is me signing out. Khuda Hafiz.